Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
There is a light at the end of the tunnel here. It seems like spring training has been going on forever. Maybe because of the pandemic season, a shortened spring training, then a lockout, and just getting things rushed. But you know what? I'm ready for some meaningful baseball. But before we get to that, we got to bring back Jason Mackey one more time down there in Pirate City, down there in Bradenton, traveling all over to Lakeland, to up to Clearwater, wherever he's going. The man's always on a move. He's always taking good food pictures, though, too. So we might have to get into that just a little bit. But, Jason, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me. Happy to do one more of these things while I'm down there. I love this place, and I'm ready to leave. I've been using some version of that line, but, spring training's awesome. It's one of my favorite times of the year. I love the weather. I love the access. I love getting to watch ball just every day. A lot more of it, I think, sometimes than you do in the season. But it just gets to the point where I feel like we're there right now. Enough is enough. Let's go. Let's see the real stuff. I want to be in Cincinnati, even if I'm cold. I probably won't be saying that on Saturday if we're like 2 games in and it's 37 degrees. But for right now, yeah, I want to see the final cuts and the final roster manipulations that the Pirates make, and let's start it.
Yeah, and we've definitely started to see, a lot of people, it's like, okay, we're down to 59 guys. Okay, we're down to and then, now we're down to 40, and then there's different things being announced. And I feel like with this spring training, the other part of it is that there's just been a lot of what ifs, a lot of different speculations of things that have been going, we're going to go on and have gone on. When we first sat down with you before spring training even started, I mean, we had a conversation, about Rodolfo Castro, and we talked about, some of the stuff that he has difficulty with, and it's just maybe the type of player that he is. And once again, these are all extreme small sample sizes, but then you have people like just overreacting to the fact that, man, like we didn't see this coming. Like we were told, like Rodolfo Castro is our second baseman, Jack Sawinski's a guaranteed spot in the outfield and is going to perform well. And you're seeing young guys kind of struggle and stumble a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a lot easier if the Pirates were leaving Bradenton and Jack Sawinski and Rodolfo Castro had run away with it with those positions. Sure, you wouldn't question it. But I mean, I also think back to last year, and Diego Castillo and Kevin Newman were world beaters. I think that was Newman's 600, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, might have been the year before. They've been really good spring training players, right? Like, would we feel any better about it? If Rodolfo Castro was hitting a lot, would we say, oh, well, problems are solved for 2023. He's good now. He's the guy. He's entrenched. I mean, no, we wouldn't. I mean, we're still seeing that the kid has stuff to work on, and that's okay. And ironically, some of what they need to work on is similar. We're talking swing decisions, too much swing and miss. Just being a little bit more of a hitter versus a strike every once in a while kind of guy. Sawinski's defense, I think, has been somewhat like wind and sun altered. Castro's defense, I feel like, has been by and large okay. It hasn't been a problem. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like it would be awesome if we had some sort of definitive answer right now. We just don't. And so to me, the de facto response is, well, these kids did something last year in the major leagues. They're probably the best option we have, and so let's do it. You're going to run into a bit of an issue in the outfield with Swaggerty and Smith and Jigba if this continues, and I think it will. I don't see how you can keep both and give them enough reps. I think you need to keep one just because otherwise, what the heck competition existed if the two guys who won it didn't make your team? Like, you got to find a spot for one, in my opinion. We can get more into that. But I just, I didn't feel like we would solve anything with Castro, even if it was good. It hasn't been good. I still think he's going to be their second baseman.
Yeah, and I can't disagree with you there, and I can't really, question the decision if that's what's made, because, if there was a competition, I know that Shelton came out, before the season and said, we don't have the everyday guy, but then you have, a Tucupita Marcano, you have a G1 Bay, and those guys, didn't really step up either. And not to say that they're, not going to show up at the major league level at some point in time. That would be absolutely silly to say. But they're also guys that, didn't get as much time as Rodolfo Castro did in the major leagues last year. And to all of his faults, still put together a fairly decent season for, a quote-unquote rookie.
Yeah, and the thing with Marcano, he doesn't offer anything to me that Bay doesn't, and the upside for Bay is much larger. In my opinion, the discussion here is between Bay and Castro. And you're looking at Castro and you're saying, okay, this guy can probably put the ball over the fence with some consistency. He doesn't offer you a lot of position versatility, but I think there's more of a hitter in there, at least right now, than there is with Bay. And has he done enough to lose the job, especially with what the competition has looked like with the other guys? And I don't think he has. You can roll with G1 Bay, and honestly, maybe they keep G1 Bay for a bench spot. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. I think it helps his cause that he can reliably play center field. He can go over to shortstop if needed. I think Castro is a little bit more of a fish out of water over there. But I think what you're banking on with Castro is that he is a better hitter. Theoretically should be a better hitter than G1 Bay. He hits for what they need. They need guys that will provide some semblance of slug. And again, it doesn't mean you need to jettison G1 Bay. It just means that Castro is probably your second baseman, and Bay is going to wind up bouncing.
Yeah, and there's where people, we're talking, about Castro, we're mentioning Sawinski and different stuff to get to that. People, that's where, this spring training stuff, it's well, it should have been an open competition. Jack Sawinski got his shot last year, but now in spring training, Caden Smith and Jigba and Travis Swaggerty are tearing it up. So take those two, and I wouldn't mind seeing Sawinski go down to AAA. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, so you're going to just ignore those 19 home runs? I know there was the strikeout problems,
right.
But can you ignore those?
In favor of the Grapefruit League. That's what you're going to do. That's what people want them to do. It's astonishing.
I don't see how people get to that that type of decision making, and it's not saying, once again, it's not saying that at some point in time, Caden Smith and Jigba, that Travis Swaggerty, they've done pretty much. If you said, okay, these guys did everything that was asked of them, yeah, it may seem like just a little bit, quote unquote, maybe unfair for, one or both of them to start out the year in AAA, but it was something that you mentioned earlier, Jason, is just, getting these guys at bats. Is there going to be enough room to get, you were saying a Swaggerty and a Caden Smith and Jigba at bats when it looks like you're probably taking, McCutchen as a part-time outfielder, DH, Reynolds, Connor Joe, who has one thing I didn't notice is that Connor Joe likes to steal bases. I saw that and I'm like, man, Connor Joe's showed a little bit of versatility in his game, but those are guys that are kind of guaranteed to a degree here at this point in time. So yeah, I don't see how you could go with both.
Yeah, I don't. You can't. You really can't. I mean, unless Kanan Smith-Njigba comes in on Thursday after the off day and said, I've learned second base. I don't think that's going to happen. But, I mean, it's just they're hamstrung a little bit there. And you only have so many DH at bats. I mean, you're going to, DH is basically going to go to Santana or Choi. I would go Choi at this point. Santana has played a lot more first base. Choi has not looked good over there, I might add, and Choi has not looked good doing much of anything, I would also add. I mean, honestly, one of the things that I think about a lot with this team is it worth it to cut Choi? And it might be. They can. There's a thing in the new CBA, like if you go to an ARB hearing, that your contract is not guaranteed until the first day of the season. So they can get out from under him right now, but they have to pay him 45 days of termination pay, which is over $1 million. And it's obviously not very much the Pirates' way to pay a guy $1 million plus to not play for them. But at the same time, like if you do want to legitimately give opportunities to younger guys, if you want to try to balance your roster out in a way that makes more sense, imagine not having Choi in the mix. And then you have, Santana, you can put Kutch at DH, maybe Connor Joe goes in the outfield, Connor Joe becomes, your third with Sawinski and Reynolds, and then you're rotating Smith-Njigba and or Swaggerty. Like, you've just got another spot to play with. I don't have any intel that they're going to do that, but I mean, at this point, you're going to pay Ji-Man Choi $4.65 million to do what? Play for a half a season? You're going to hope to get something out of him, enough that it's going to net a prospect when he could be had for a fringe minor leaguer this offseason? Is he really going to hit that much? I question that. And so, it's $1 million and change to get rid of him, and I have a tough time seeing the Pirates do that. But it might be the best move for the team to free up some at-bats and some developmental stuff for their guys.
Yeah, and I mean, we've already seen, a Connor Joe, a guy that can also play first base and plays it fairly well defensively. So, I mean, we're obviously not going to see, a 37-year-old Carlos Santana stand out there for, 162 games, but it does free up, because if you bring, like you're saying, bring Connor Joe into first base, then it frees up some more at bats, in the outfield as well. So I mean, that's just something to consider. And when I first saw somebody throw that out there on Twitter, I kind of thought, I'm like, man, that's kind of crazy. But then it was like thinking, like, okay, Ji-Man Choi dealing with an elbow issue, didn't hit well towards the end of last year. Got it cleaned up a little bit, and is still coming back from that injury. And it's like, maybe we thought he was going to recover quicker. It didn't happen. Sorry, Ji-Man Choi. And then it's not like he wouldn't be picked up somewhere else. I mean, he's got enough of a track record in Major League Baseball that, somebody's going to give him a shot, and he's going to play some Major League ball this year.
You would think so. It was not great last year. It really wasn't. I mean, 188 over his last 60. Something like that. Like, you can pull a WRC plus or OPS plus, and like, they paid him in a decently favorable light. But we're talking about somebody who moves not at all at first base, throwing not good. Like, on a better team, there's no way he's getting out in the field or should be out in the field. Like, he does not run well. He's not an overpowering power hitter. Like, he's going to put the ball over the fence from time to time. Okay. He's going to laugh and be silly and be kind of funny. Okay. That's great. He's going to take some pitches and work some counts. Okay. Is that worth $5.5 million or $4.5 million, I guess, is what he wound up with? Like, I don't see it. I don't see it. I would much rather just cut my losses and say, you know what? I'm gonna pay him this. Otherwise, I would be on the hook paying him this to get to the season. I don't think I'm going to get anything back for him that makes sense, and I'd rather just pay my young guys. And I understand why the Pirates did what they did with him. Like, you trade for him because you don't yet have Carlos Santana, and you have no assurance of having Carlos Santana. But once Santana agrees to sign with them and they're able to consummate, like, of course you do it. It makes sense. You figure out the details later. Well, these are the details. We're going to figure it out later. Like, Carlos Santana is just a much better fit for the team. He has been around Castro and Cruz. People love him. I'm fine with this defense. I think his offense is going to turn around. I don't put much stock in veterans and how they perform in spring training. It's like Carlos Santana is such a a better fit for this team. It makes G-Man Choi expendable. And, man, I just wouldn't be married to keeping him on the club.
Yeah, and that's where Ben Cherington goes, is that, I mean, the man doesn't make a move until he has like other moves solidified. That's the way he's kind of always run it. It's not a bad way, but like you said, it was just like, okay, we got Connor Joe, but we didn't know we were going to get Andrew McCutcheon. You know, we got G-Man Choi. We didn't know we were going to get Carlos Santana. We got
you know what, Craig, though, like in Cherington's defense, like you can't predict that with Carlos Santana.
No, absolutely not.
They don't know. They're trying, and if he doesn't go after Choi, all of a sudden we're sitting here saying, "What the heck are you doing, dude? Your first base offensive production was a black hole. You're not getting anything." And then you go get Connor Joe, which was a reasonable deal, and then he had no way of knowing Kutch was going to text Bob Nutting and say, "I want to come back."
Yeah, absolutely.
Come on.
And it's the same thing as signing a Vince Velasquez. You know, not knowing that you were going to be able to sign, you know, Rich Hill. He definitely hedges his bets. It's definitely not a bad thing. It's just it's the way this kind of offseason has gone, and it's taken, you know, turns, but at some point in time, you know, this you have to look and say, you know, we want these guys to get so many at bats, we want these guys to get so many innings, and I don't disagree with the Choi thing whatsoever. And like I said, when it first came, somebody had mentioned it, I was like, man, there's no way they would do that. That's crazy. Like, why would they do that? And then, like, listening to you and hearing everything else, I'm like, you know what, it definitely kind of makes sense. And it wouldn't be the first time that, you know, a veteran was cut from a team, you know, surprisingly towards, you know, the end of spring training. It's not like it hasn't happened before. If you ever see me out and about in Pittsburgh, you will always recognize me, and not just because of the white beard, but also because of the Y that is always on top of my head, the hat I always wear. The Yins brand, proud partners with Bucs in the Basement. 3 dynasties, 1 brand, Yins. Finally, 1 brand to rep all black and gold. Follow @ShopYins for new merch drops and giveaways. Order online at www.shopyins, the emphasis on the 2 Z's, high quality comfort, lightweight materials, a new modern look for the black and gold, made for Yins, by a Yinzer. But one thing like that we've kind of been talking about here is, you know, a lot of overreactions and I don't know, underreactions to spring training numbers and different stuff. And you can answer this as honestly and openly as you can. Do you think that in some ways we as Pirates fans and as that we think with our hearts a little bit and we find these guys that we like, and if it's not him, then we almost get upset if it's another guy who performs better?
Yes. And I think that's sports fandom in general, right? Like,
yeah.
You know, you have who you want, and you have what things you want to support, and who you have an emotional connection with, or whatever. And I'm not here to debate any of that, but I mean, do I think that like Pirates fans get hooked onto causes? Of course they do. I also cover the Penguins, and I think Penguins fans get hooked onto causes. Shoot, media members get hooked onto causes. You know, that's the whole rabbit hole of like psychology and professional sports. But you know, I think that fans and people on the outside, and I'm guilty of it too, are way too reactionary to what happens in spring training. Because if you think about what we've seen in spring training, and then put that in a month-long stretch from July 17th to August, 16th, we're not going to be reacting to any of that stuff. But now, because it's at the beginning, and because we're all starving for the sport that we love, we're reacting to it and basing decisions off it, basing roster moves off it, and all of that stuff. I am glad, and I would hope that all professional teams take a more sobering look at the situation. And that's not to disregard what we've seen over the past 3 weeks of games. Certainly take that into account. They should take into account how guys have worked since the moment they walked into the facility. Take in how much they retain information, how their bodies are moving, what they're doing relative to what they're trying to do. But it's not just how you perform in spring training games. And you can't, I got an email from somebody today, I'm not going to divulge the name, but saying, like, how can they possibly go north without both Swaggerty and Kanan Smith and Jigba? Like, it took everything every fiber of my being to say, like, I don't know, by plane? Like, how else would they go north? Like, it's not going to cripple the franchise. They're coming off back-to-back 100-loss seasons, and they're not going to keep both. Like, it's rosters and reality. Now, I said earlier that, you talk about competition and you look like fools if you don't actually award anything to anybody who deserves it. And I believe that. You do have bench spots. You do have things that you want guys to earn. And one of these guys has earned to break camp with a big club. And I'm not sure who it is yet. It might depend on what they do with Choi or how guys finish or if there's injuries or if Kutch wakes up tomorrow with a bum elbow. I don't know. But anyway, it's a whole long-winded rant or way of saying that, like, I do think the team considers things much differently than fans do.
And a piece of that, I mean, if I threw these numbers out to Pirates fans, there's a guy on our team who had 202 plate appearances in AAA last year, batted .318, slugged .518, hit 8 home runs, then made it up to the majors towards the end of the year, got 91 plate appearances, and put together .7 WAR on Fangraphs, .9 WAR on Baseball Reference, and was around like 26.
Can I guess who it is?
Yeah, who is it?
Mark Mathias?
Absolutely. Why? I just don't understand why Pirates fans have. I think it's maybe just the. I don't know. It's the syndrome of this is a guy who was DFA'd by another team, but if this guy was in the system for the Pirates, we would be clamoring for him to get his chance in the majors.
Yeah. Because you always think your guys are the best. We want all of the. We're going to give you all of our bad players for all of your good players. Like, that's the same thing psychologically that's happening here. And I understand why. Like, it's great. That's why, you guys have stuff to talk about. It's why I have, a job and I can provide for my family based on this stuff. Like, I'm not about to take a crap on it. Believe me, I'm hugely appreciative. But, you just need to try to put a different hat on sometimes and think about, like, is your perception of what's happening skewed by anything? And a lot of times it can be. And in this case, I think perception can be skewed by sample size. I think perception can be skewed by, competition, time in the game. I've seen too many spring training games and I care to count. The back half of them can get a little sloppy. You're playing against guys that are going to be in AA. AAA, whatever. Like, it's not the stiffest competition. So I am fine waiting what Sawinski and what Castro have done at the major league level more. At the same time, just don't be blind to it, right? Like, if they continue doing this, if it continues to be an issue with them striking out and not being very good hitters, meaning, like, you're not putting the ball in play enough, they need to act. Put Swaggerty in there. Put G1 Bay in there. Play Chris Owens for crying out loud. I don't care. Play Mark Mathias. Like, don't sit there and be just it's the word I'm looking for. I'm not satiated, but, don't be complacent. Don't be complacent with your team. But, I do agree with giving those guys a nice little head start.
And if anybody, like, questions why, to a degree, why Mark, Mathias was DFA'd, go check out Roster Resource. Go look at the depth chart for the Texas Rangers compared to the depth chart for the
big part for them.
For the Pittsburgh Pirates, and try to figure out where Mark Mathias fits in. And that's where, like, I feel like it's a great thing. I'm a Pirates fan. Like, my main focus is the Pirates, but you also in some ways have to broaden your horizons a little bit. Just trying to educate fans a little bit here. I just not talking down to it, but just saying like if it's this type of guy, like I have no problem giving a player of this caliber, a chance. I think that what fans, just have that, bad taste in their mouth is, guys that maybe have been given a longer leash in previous years than we thought they should have had, and hoping that that doesn't continue happen, as this rebuild build continues.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is, I mean, the Pirates could stand to have a few more of these success stories. For all the dumpster dives they've done, they really haven't come out with much. I mean, you could argue that like Ben Gamble became a find, but numerically you could put together a pretty good case that Ben Gamble was just a guy. I watched him play a lot, and I liked Ben Gamble as a player, and I thought he added some stuff to the team. But for as many times as they're claiming guys, making these, itty-bitty trades or basically trying to look under rocks and find a diamond, you would think they'd be able to develop something into something. And that hasn't happened. So, I'd like to see Mark Mathias come to Pittsburgh and have an OPS that is even a reasonable facsimile of what he did at the end of 2022. But the history of the recent Pirates and what they've done the past couple of years, like they just haven't been able to help those players realize the performance. So I think people have the idea that, oh man, here they go. They got another bit part from another organization. They're going to force feed this guy in and then ride him entirely too long, just like they've done with Miguel Del Pozo and Kai Tom. And I could think of a few more if you give me time. Even Peters was sort of one of them. And, there's just too many Zach Collinses and Kevin Padlows of the world, even Van Meter. It's not about those guys individually. It's just like this group does have a habit of getting a guy they're convinced is going to be good, and they keep riding him, and he stinks, and it just like your fan base wants to kill you. And so, like, if you go get some of these guys and you actually turn them into something, I think people are going to be more willing to hear you out.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's building that trust, and if it's kind of like if one guy works out, then another guy works out, and it kind of becomes a little bit of a snowball. But before I let you go here, Jason, I did want to talk to you about one more thing. During the last time we discussed this, we were talking about a 6-man rotation. As everybody that will be listening to this tomorrow should already know, that Luis Ortiz, has been, sent down to AAA. He's not going to be starting with the big league club. Johan Oviedo is still here. So right now, I mean, we still have in, big league camp, there are still 6 guys that, the team deems as potential starters. The one thing for me, Jason, is that we talked about this before. You've written about this, and it's kind of hard to figure out. And I want to take a little bit of a different angle at this. Is just that, okay, you take 6 starters, that means you have 7 relievers. How do you have, with all those games, how do you not burn out your bullpen if you start with a 6-man rotation?
Yeah, I know. I've thought about that, Craig. And, I mean, their bullpen burned out last year. They ran the wheels off of them. You had guys hurt. I think when their bullpen was fully healthy and not dealing with stuff even like pitching hurt, they weren't bad. And I think this group can be halfway decent, but I worry about overtaxing them. And I think that's what they could end up doing. I want to step back on the 6-man rotation thing, or just kind of talk about Oviedo and the 6-man rotation generally, I should say. Like, he starts, I believe, their next game after the break, or after the off day, or maybe the one after that. I'm not sure. He's up soon. It's going to be really interesting to see how he fares, because I feel like if he goes out there and, puts up 4 or 5 scoreless, you might have to think about it. I mean, even if it's recency bias, like, I'm not basing the entire decision off of that. But, I mean, there's been plenty of him that's been good, and there's been a little bit that's been bad. But the bad has been kind of explainable. And I think that, you could look at somebody like Oviedo and say, you need to start. You need to be in a starting rotation. what that means for the other guys, I don't know. That's the difficult question. And that's something I worry about, as I said at the beginning, where, are you overtaxing the guys you have? And then if you run them into the ground, or all of a sudden midway through the season, are they scouring waiver wires again to try to plop somebody in and fill a hole? So your other option then, Luis Ortiz is down. You're obviously, holding developmental spots for Quinn Priester, Mike Burrows. I do think Carmen Mlodzinski is going to wind up as a reliever. Kyle Nicholas is another guy down there, probably will end up starting. So it leaves basically one spot in a 5-man. You put Oviedo down there. You could probably make the argument for it, honestly, and I don't think I'd hate it. I don't think he has a lot to gain from beating up on AAA guys at this point, but I do think he has something to gain from continuing to be stretched out, for them to get an actual bullpen arm there, 5-man rotation, 8-man bullpen. We're not going to overtax anybody. So there are victories there. Is he going to become a markedly better pitcher? I don't know. But again, if he goes out tomorrow, or I should say Thursday, I don't even know what day it is down here anymore. If he goes out here the next time and struggles, I think he's going to make that decision for them, and he's going to make it pretty easy. They could just say, okay, he's going down. We're going to go with the 5-man. We'll call you when we need you, Johan. Thank you. So anyway, I'll be curious to see how he pitches, because I think it might dictate some things.
Yeah, and that's the one that kind of just wears on my mind. And you even mentioned Carmen Mlodzinski. It definitely looks like a bullpen role, at least for the time being, is in his future. Because that's the one thing that I feel like you can garner sometimes from a spring training game, and it's not that like everything matters, but if a guy comes in and starts on a clean inning and goes a couple innings, and then you're thinking, okay, well then this guy they're looking at as a starter, but then when they started bringing Mlodzinski in, in the middle of innings and stuff, and kind of just like what a normal relief role would look like, no empty bags, maybe trying to, hold somebody on, different stuff like that. I was like, and it's not saying that that's where he's going to go for life again. Guys have been stretched back out. Oviedo was made a reliever by, the Cardinals for a time being, and then had to be stretched back out. But yeah, at some point in time, you only have so many rotation spots in the majors and in AAA, and then even down, to AA with guys pushing up. So Oviedo, that's the interesting one to me. Ortiz, I always kind of saw him as AAA just to, kind of polish his stuff up a little bit and see if he is going to make a, major league starter, or, be a pretty darn good reliever. But yeah, Jason, I worry about that 6-man rotation, just because Colin Holderman, coming off an injury, how much do you want to press him? David Bednar, has ended up, with a back injury and getting a little bit worn out over the past 2 seasons. Will Crowe throwing his arm off last year, and I don't know. You have some guys that can eat innings, but I also don't want to throw Dwayne Underwood Jr. to the Wolves again this year, like I feel like he has been the past couple years.
And Craig, I want to read to you a comment from Carmen Mlodzinski in a second, but I agree with that part. And I also think about what happens if there are injuries, because this is a long season and there will be. So who are your next calls? What, Johan Ramirez? I've liked some of what Johan's done, but he pitched like crap in the spring, and I'm not sure I want to be bringing him into a leverage game at this point. Angel Perdomo, Daniel Zamora, okay. Rob Zastrisny, they've been okay. I'm not sure if your team's fortunes and protecting leads are banking on those guys in major league competition against the Dodgers. I don't like the Pirates' chances. No offense, and I would much rather see them tread lightly with the bullpen stuff. As far as Mlodzinski, I thought this was interesting, and as we're talking here, I pulled out my laptop because I want to get it right and read this to you. So I asked him, I did a story on him recently. I don't know if people read it or not, but I asked him about his velocity ticking up. It's one of the first things we talked about. He said, I don't know if I have a great answer for you. And also in a bullpen role, I think everybody in the clubhouse as a pitcher, they'd say your velocity is a little higher. And that kind of struck me. In a bullpen role, I said, in a bullpen role, have they told you anything? He said, no, they haven't, not really. It was almost like oh crap, I said something I shouldn't have, let me back up. I'm sure that's not quite what it was, but there are enough signs there with how he's exerting himself, what his outings look like, how they're using him, what he's saying, how he fared, didn't fare, how his stuff ticks up, and seemingly helps when it ticks up. Like, I don't know, man. To me, Majinski looks like a reliever.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be a bad thing. I mean, that's where it's like if some of this stuff, could start to work out. Obviously, people had in their minds that, Carmen Majinski was going to be in the future rotation. I mean, as people make them out, those, 2025 rotations, his name's been mentioned. But if he ends up being a pretty solid reliever and his stuff plays that way and he can tick up that velocity a little bit,
ain't nothing wrong with that. You need those guys too.
Yeah, you definitely. We need all the arms and all the bats we can get, and to get to bring up to Cincinnati, to bring out to Indianapolis, to bring to Altoona. Let's just fill these spots as much as we can. But Jason, you know what, brother? It has been great talking to you again, man. I always get lost track of time here. I could talk baseball for hours, and luckily you do that for me, and the guys that come on here do it for me, because I know I'm not going to get it from my wife, because she'll kind of just stare at me blankly. But Jason, enjoy the rest of your time down there, man. Anybody that doesn't, if you don't follow Jason on Twitter, please do. Absolutely, read all the stuff that he's putting out at the Post-Gazette. Great articles. And like I said, baseball, meaningful baseball, is on the horizon.
Let's go.
Hip, hip. Now I see the changes in this town. They change.